Okay, let's get started with I think the last item on our agenda.
Yeah, last substantive point, yeah.
You get the bucket and spade ready very soon. All right, so we're going to have a conversation about Ukraine's healthcare system. We're very pleased to welcome Chris Stokes, who is the Emergency Coordinator for Ukraine at MSF, and Mr. Shahbaz Israr Khan, who's the MSF's Operations Coordinator for Ukraine. We'll hear from both of them during the course of our meeting here today. And we also welcome Ms. Valeria Soruchan, who is Director of the Department of Medical Services at the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, who will join us remotely. And we thank Valeria as well for joining us this morning, or this afternoon. And finally, also welcome colleagues from the European Commission, Hans Das, who is with us again, who's Deputy Director General, DG ECHO, and Ms. Marta Witrikovska, who is Deputy Head of the Ukraine Division at the External Action Service, who will join us as part of the debate. And thank you all for being here today. We also have a representative of DG Enest, who may wish to contribute during the course of this discussion. Right, so before we hear from our main speakers, I would want to give the floor to Ms. Pekka Toveri, who is Chair of the European Parliament's delegation. He's not here.
He's on his way.
He's on his way. So we'll come back to him shortly. So we've also invited members of the AFET committee and the Sant committee to this debate. So we'll hear from Mr. Toveri in a short while when he gets here. So before giving the floor to Mr. Stokes, who's our main speaker from the MSF, I want to highlight to members that you have in your meeting file the MSF report, No Safe Place to Heal, published on Monday, which documents the systematic attacks on healthcare infrastructure and medical personnel in Ukraine and their devastating impact on civilian access to care. The report draws on evidence gathered by MSF teams between 2022 and 2025, and its findings are quite shocking, both in terms of the clearly strategic nature of the attacks and the profound impact on Ukraine's healthcare system. So with that, Chris, you're very welcome. I give you the floor for 7 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is this on? Yeah? Okay, thanks for coming, and thanks for the attention that you're paying to this presentation. Ukraine is often talked about and focused on in terms of politics or military developments, but the humanitarian story, what's happening in particular close to the front lines, is perhaps underreported. And for Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, we've been working along these front lines over 1,000 kilometres long since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, providing medical care through ambulances, mobile clinics, supporting the hospitals. And we wanted to share with you the picture that's coming out of this evolution of the war there and the worsening situation for civilians. But I would like to start just with a quote that illustrates some of the main, captures some of the main issues. We have a lot of interviews in our report, and this is just one of them. On the 24th of December, I was wounded by artillery shelling by the Russian army from the bank of the river, the left bank. I was at the Central Market with my granddaughter. One shell fell just a few meters from me. I saw many dead bodies, the lifeless bodies of people I knew, my neighbours lying injured on the asphalt, their skin burning. Our survival is a miracle. I was injured in the abdomen and hospitalised. I had to undergo surgery, but immediately after my operation, the hospital itself came under shelling. It was like a horror movie. After this attack, the doctors told me that I could be transferred to a hospital in Mykolaiv. I agreed and was transferred by ambulance. My family is still in Kherson. This morning, my daughter texted me to say that drones were flying over their house again. My children are scared and their children are scared. This illustrates really the complex, multifaceted nature, both the attacks on healthcare, the difficulty to get treatment in a war zone, such as this, and the targeting of civilians. The overall humanitarian picture for Ukraine is very severe. Over 16,000 civilian killed and close to 50,000 injured, so 65,000 casualties. But these are only verified numbers. A lot of the deaths go underreported, so the numbers are significantly higher. And the civilian casualties keep on climbing up. So each year is worse than the previous. 2025 was 30% higher than 24, and itself roughly higher in terms of casualties than 2023. But behind these numbers, we really have to see how the war has changed close to the front line and what's the impact on people. First, drones have changed the way civilians are being injured, and I'll explain a little bit after this. Secondly, healthcare is becoming increasingly difficult to access, not only because facilities are damaged or destroyed, but because people simply cannot move around safely. And third, the report argues that many people are now dying not from the initial attack, but from subsequent lack of care for non-communicable diseases, chronic diseases. So let's start with the attacks on healthcare. We note a deliberate pattern of destruction of healthcare by Russian forces in Ukraine. Just looking at MSF's experience between April 2022 and December 25, we had more than 20 attacks affecting health facilities that we were directly supporting with our teams. 8 hospitals in which we've been working were evacuated. Of these hospitals, 4 were destroyed. I worked in some of these projects myself. Myself in Kostiantynivka, Pokrovsky, those hospitals no longer exist. We run ambulance bases close to in the east and the south, and we've had to close 7 of these ambulance bases, either because we had security threats or the area was just too dangerous. We've lost 2 of our officers were damaged or destroyed, one by a Russian missile in Pokrovsk. MSF lost access to around 80 villages previously served by mobile clinics. So the access, the quality of care that you can provide to people is reducing as well. Another worrying trend we've noticed is the increase in double tap attacks. So these are familiar to anyone who worked in Syria before. It's where a first attack takes place and a second one is launched to kill the rescuers. And this is something that we've noticed increasing at least since 2023. And as we run ambulance services, it has a big impact on us. We often have to wait 35, 40, 45 minutes before attending the site of an attack. We're now working in hospitals with reinforced concrete walls. This has become the new normal for us. We put blast-proof film on the windows. We reduce our movements. We often live in the hospitals for 2 weeks at a time, not even leaving the building to smoke a cigarette, which a lot of doctors, as you know, will tend to do. So they tend to remain completely bunkerized in these environments. So basically, there's no stability or security for healthcare workers, neither for the hospitals nor the ambulances. And this is not an accident. The attacks are too frequent. The pattern keeps repeating. It's clear that Russian forces, as they're operating in the areas in which we're working today, afford no protection to hospitals, ambulances or healthcare workers. Another development I want to touch on that we detail in the report is the rise of drone warfare. So there's been a fundamental shift. Before we were treating victims of artillery, now we're treating victims of drone attacks, and these are the majority of our trauma cases. Because they're more targeted and pinpoint and tend to land on the victim or very close by, they create more complex traumas. We've noticed a very significant increase. Multiple fractures in our early rehabilitation program have increased by 51%. Multiple amputations have tripled. We have a lot of finger and hand amputations that have increased sharply because people tend to protect themselves from drones just before they come in. This has a big impact on the lives they're going to lead afterwards. And as one of our surgeons explains in the report, the first battle is against the bleeding when one of these victims come in. The second one is against infection because the drones create multiple entry points into the body, creating multiple infections, risk of infections. So we often lose patients after they've been saved on the operating table. We lose them further down the road. Next to this, because of the increased insecurity and the general fatigue, we've noted a significant decrease in the number of medical staff working in areas closer to the front line. We're talking about the first 50, 60, 80 kilometers behind it. So Kherson Hospital, where we work, we have 60% fewer doctors, Ukrainian doctors, 50% fewer nurses, even though the number of severe cases has actually increased and there would be need for significantly more. So they are definitely, at this point, leaving the front line. And as one of our clinical officers explained, everyone is afraid. Our eyes may be afraid, but our hands keep working. Who, if not us? And I have to say, also a big thanks to our Ukrainian colleagues, the 400 Ukrainian colleagues working in our ambulance and medical projects in Ukraine who are really carrying this forward. A last point that's a salient point that's become increasingly visible in this crisis is let's call it the silent crisis where chronic becomes critical. So what we've noticed, and we did interviews of patients that we see in our clinics, is that before the full-scale invasion, we asked them, what kind of access did you have to healthcare? So we're talking about people in Kherson, in Dnipro Oblast, Donetsk Oblast, etc., and the north. 72%, so three-quarters, said they could usually access healthcare whenever they needed it. By 2025, that figure had fallen to 35%. At the same time, we asked people, what was the proportion of you who could rarely or never obtain access to healthcare, so who didn't see a doctor basically before the full-scale invasion? The number was quite low, 7%. Now it's jumped to 35%. So this is one of the clearest illustrations of, in the report of how the war is affecting people in these areas. So people with let's say, routine chronic conditions, such as diabetes, hypertension, etc., don't seek care, are not able to. It's too dangerous and they barely move. So we've launched a program of remote consultations, but clearly this is not sufficient and doesn't complete, and we still have the problem of providing medical attention to these people. This is underreported in terms of casualties and deaths in Ukraine. So the numbers I gave you in the beginning are generally widely available statistics, but the number of people who die early death because their chronic conditions are untreated across the front line is not sufficiently reported and hasn't really been studied effectively. So the report presents a bleak picture. And the central message for us is really about protecting not only the hospitals, but the ambulances, the operating theatres, the rehabilitation, the long-term chronic disease care. There really is today no safe place to heal in Ukraine. Perhaps one small point as well to point out that although Russia is largely responsible for these destructions in the areas in which we operate, we've noticed an increase in attacks on healthcare, be it in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Sudan. 10 years after the UN resolution 2286, clearly this resolution designed to protect healthcare is not being enforced, and we really call on the end of the normalization of attacks on healthcare and hospitals, be it in Ukraine, but also in other humanitarian crises around the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And now we go to Hans Hadas, who's here on the podium, Deputy Director General of DG ECHO. Hans, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for making time available in your agenda for this very important report. And I would like to start by thanking MSF for documenting and reporting on all of these challenges. We very much shared your analysis. We agree on the problems that you have identified. And we also agree on the need to step up advocacy and to speak out more on these issues. A couple of general remarks from my side, and then I'll focus on the EU response to these issues. First of all, Ukraine's humanitarian situation obviously remains dire. Hostilities have recently intensified, killing and injuring civilians, targeting homes, schools, transport networks, critical energy infrastructure, and indeed healthcare facilities. Since the start of 2026, casualties among aid workers in Ukraine have nearly doubled. I'm mentioning all of this just to say that these are all clear violations of international humanitarian law, and they must stop. We need to continue to publicly condemn these attacks and collectively call on Russia to allow to cease these violations of international humanitarian law and to allow for better humanitarian access, especially in frontline areas. Moving to the EU's response, the EU's commitment to humanitarian aid in Ukraine is unwavering. Since February 2022, we have provided over 1.5 billion in humanitarian aid. This year alone, we are providing 220 million. And health is a very important priority within that response for obvious reasons. While remarkably resilient, Ukraine's health system continues to face immense strain. In 2026, more than 4 million people require urgent health assistance, making healthcare one of the absolute top humanitarian priorities in Ukraine. Attacks on healthcare in Ukraine remain widespread and severe, as the report shows. Since February 2022, Ukraine has accounted for around 45% of all attacks on healthcare reported globally. More than 2,540 health facilities have been confirmed as affected by attacks, with over 230 deaths and 1,000 injuries among health workers and patients. These are figures that need to be taken very seriously. And just to add, it is very severe in Ukraine, but I've just come back from Palestine and we see a very similar pattern there with also many attacks on health facilities. We see the same in Lebanon, we see the same in South Sudan. So it is a horizontal issue that perhaps after the summer we need to come back to and try to see whether Europe can step up on the advocacy side. So we're doing a lot of response work on health. We are funding 5 critical programs to restore and strengthen access to primary healthcare in Ukraine's frontline areas. This includes prefab medical units, as well as water purification and heating systems to help ensure continuity of care after attacks or power failures. ECHO-funded partners are also delivering emergency life-saving healthcare and medical evacuations, including in areas within 20 kilometers from the front line. They're also providing mental health support, trauma care, reproductive health, and physical rehabilitation. Ukraine is a crisis where we are responding with our humanitarian aid funding, but also with our civil protection mechanism, where our member states are in a coordinated way providing massive in-kind assistance. And in the health area, substantial support has been mobilized based on the priorities identified by Ukraine's Ministry of Health. This has included, for instance, more than 200 ambulances, over 1.4 million units of therapeutics, essential medical equipment and protective gear. And we have also generously made available our own EU strategic stockpiles, in particular the Rescue Medical and CBRN strategic stockpiles. Just a final word on the medical evacuation program that we are running for Ukraine. Since March 2022, we have supported medical evacuations of Ukrainian patients to European hospitals. So far, over 5,200 patients have been evacuated under the UCPM to 22 European countries to receive specialized treatment, providing much-needed relief to Ukraine's healthcare system. That medevac operation is a European success story. It is a real burden-sharing effort by all of our member states, or at least 22 of our member states, and the European Commission. And it is a concrete expression and model of European solidarity in a very, very difficult situation. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans, for that outline. So, we are joined remotely by Ms. Valeria Saruchan, who is Director of the Department of Medical Services at the Ministry of Health in Ukraine. And we see you there, Valeria. You're very, very welcome. I hope you can hear us and see us. If you can, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Apologies, Valeria, we can see you and you're presentation, but we can't hear you at this point. So maybe we will ask you to reconnect unless some intervention can happen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, Valeria, we can hear you and see you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, dear Chair, dear committee. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the very true two presentations that we have heard just now. We would also like to thank the EU for the commitment in the humanitarian aid and the funds, and also for drawing such public attention to what is going on in the healthcare system. We also presented a little, just a very short, brief, can we do the next slide, please? Very brief presentation for the committee to have an understanding of how the system functions and what measures have been taken also by the government across the country to provide medical services. Can we do the next slide, please? At this point, we have the emergency medical teams that are equipped with specialized gear, and they function 24/7, no matter what attacks, what drones are flying, what rockets are flying. Here on the presentation, you can see how they're functioning at basically just a couple of minutes right after the attack. 10 to 15% of such medical teams, they can be drawn and called from each region to help with mass casualty events. Next slide, please. And just about a month ago, we have a national emergency medical team that was verified by the WHO. Next slide. With the support of international partners and, of course, on behalf of the Ministry of Health, we constantly conduct trainings for CBRN, and just in June of this year, we had a training in the city of Vinnytsia, Lviv region. Next slide. We, at this point, have set up a network of 180 hospitals prepared for mass casualty events. These hospitals have a reserve of medicines and medical supplies. They have clear emergency response plans. 27 of these hospitals have decontamination tents, and on a year-round basis, we try to monitor them to see their preparedness and readiness. Next slide. Evacuation was addressed with the Medevac program. And once again, many thanks from the Ukrainian side for the help. There was a number said that more than 5,000 patients were evacuated abroad. I'm going to correct a little bit and say that it's more than 6,000 patients at this point that have been evacuated abroad, which we are very grateful for the support and for the help. Here on the presentation, you can see from the Norwegian side, we had a bus donated to us, which helps us a lot when we evacuate patients. We can at the same time we can evacuate 3 patients, heavy patients, because the bus also contains 2 intensive care units. In the middle picture, what we wanted to address is that we set up a system which is called targeted evacuation. This was put up for the armed forces of Ukraine, but then we expanded the program, and now at this point with this targeted evacuation, what it means is that we directly take the soldiers from the battlefield and we targetedly evacuate them to a certain hospital that fulfills their needs. This program was it began for the armed forces, but now we've expanded it for the civilians also, and especially for the burn patients. And we've evacuated about 81. We've done about 81 successful evacuations. So again, very thank you to a lot of thanks to all the partners. Next slide, please. when we speak about access, because access is one of the main things that we need to provide to the whole nation, we have put up mobile pharmacies in the remote and the rural areas. At this point, we have about, on the left-hand side, you can see the presentation, you can see our Minister Viktor Leshko monitoring actually how the mobile pharmacies work. At this point, we have 35 mobile pharmacies across 19 regions of Ukraine. On the right-hand side, you can see the recovery facilities that are set up in more than 500 hospitals. This is across the region. At this point, we've performed about 16,000. At this point, 16,000 sessions per day are performed, and about they're provided by 11,000 specialists. Next slide, please. Also, one of the main focuses is for the mental health care. At this point, we've set up about 195 mental health centers across the region where patients can receive mental health care. Also, we've integrated it into the primary health care, meaning that all of our primary care physicians, they have undergone a training program where they can, at an early age, detect a mental health issue and then refer the patient to a more specialized level. Next slide. A little bit about the infrastructure. As of today, more than 800 healthcare facilities have been damaged, and the World Bank estimated the recovery at about $24 billion in the next 10 years. At the beginning of the war, we have set up a capable network of hospitals, which consists of about 632 key hospitals. They provide a full-scale medical care in each region. At this point, with the support and with the help of the international partners, 70% of them are fully autonomous, meaning they have their own power source, they have their own water and heating supply. At this point, 100% of those hospitals in the capable network have generators. Next slide, please. 90% of these hospitals have autonomous heating, and on the slides you can see presented a setup of the solid fuel boilers. Next slide. 74% have autonomous water supply, and here you see a setup of a well and an autonomous water supply. Next slide. At this point, 51% of the hospitals are in the capable network are equipped with shelters that meet the need, that meet the government building standards. Of course, there's a lot more work to be done because the other 49% also need to be adjusted, and this was all done during the war. Next slide. We're also taking measures to set up underground hospitals. One of these hospitals on the left-hand side, you see it is in the city Kryvyi Rih. And on the right-hand side, this is a hospital in Kherson. So such underground hospitals, as you can see on the pictures presented, they have they're equipped with mobile beds. They have ICU. They also have specialized diagnostic equipment and also operation rooms to perform surgery. So, dear colleagues, all in all, these actions are part of an ongoing effort that has been started at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Many results are possible with the support and the help, constant help, of our international partners, and we are very grateful for such support. We are always open to cooperation and ready to give our experience. So at the end of the day, live and learn. And once again, a lot of thanks for the publicity that the European Union is gathering to see what crisis is going on in Ukraine. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Valeria. It's an incredible story of resilience and perseverance. So thank you. We are now joined by Mr. Pekka Toveri, who is the chair of the European Parliament's delegation to the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee. So, Pekka, you're very welcome, and I'll give you the floor for 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. I was in a camera meeting about the Russian hybrid activities against Baltic states and lost the time of sense. Sense of time, sorry. But here we are. We are grateful for your committee's continued interest and engagement in the topic of Ukraine. As we all know, Russia's attack, especially mass aerial drone attacks and ballistic missiles, also target hospital, ambulances, first responders and aid workers. As of May 2026, the World Health Organization has verified more than 3,000 attacks on healthcare since 2022 through the surveillance system for attack on healthcare. From primary healthcare centers to maternity hospitals, from ambulance teams to terms to pharmaceutical warehouses, every component of the system has been affected. Many of us have seen burnout ambulance vehicles on display here in Brussels or during our visits to Ukraine. One of the most notorious attacks happened 2 years ago in July on the Okhmadur Children's Hospital in central Kiev. It was visited by our colleagues from the European Parliament's Committee on Public Health. Healthcare facilities have been severely impacted. Around 80% of verified attacks on healthcare have been affected clinics, hospitals and other places of care. Beyond the immediate casualties, such attacks disrupt service delivery, damage critical infrastructure and erode the health system's capacity over time. Therefore, there are also very important secondary impacts. The situation can be particularly difficult in the areas close to the front line. We just yesterday had discussions here in Parliament, and representatives from Kherson told about how they have been over 4 years under fire when Russians are shooting on the civilian installations across the Dnieper River and hunt down single civilian people with FPV drones, which have forced them to start building up a hospital, for example, underground, as we heard. This committee's competencies also include the international humanitarian law, which is totally disrespected by the Russian Federation. And this is, again, something that we have a long history. We Finns learned from the Second World War not to mark any military healthcare facilities with the Red Cross as international law required, because Russians targeted them, and we don't do it now either, and neither does Ukraine. And that tells that if we never punish Russia for its actions, they will continue. And these cynical attacks are also dismantling the rules-based order. This is why they are also an attack on our shared values. Therefore, it's crucial that we look at the wider implications and again find ways to punish Russia for these breaks of international law and laws. Thank you for organising today's discussion to hear directly from those who have been experiences from these Russian actions on the ground. And while we listen to the challenges, we should also think of the solutions and how we can help Ukraine on its existential fight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Pekka, for that insight, particularly the experience of Finland in sharing a border with Russia. So let's now turn to the members. We'll start with Udo, if you wish, for S&D.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Médecins Sans Frontières, for keeping up this issue and giving us this insightful report. I think, yes, it is indeed of utmost importance to keep us informed and to share your complicated experiences, and we only can underscore the admiration for the colleagues working in the front line and supporting the people in the Ukraine on that. We have, and I know a bit because I was in the last mandate the chair for the humanitarian subcommittee humanitarian rights, and we went to the Ukraine as the first committee is going to the formerly occupied territory, so we have a bit of experience on that. This committee, the Development Committee, and Hans knows that, and the others know that, our guests and colleagues, has to work against its own speechlessness, because we are permanently dealing with issues. World Food Programme was on the agenda today, the big conflicts in the Horn of Africa, in Afghanistan and elsewhere are on the agenda. And we are in a ritual, we are permanently describing the growing crisis. We listen to reports, what our institution, and we need to have these reports, there's no criticism. So we listen to the reports of how much money we invest from the European Commission side, from the External Action Service, from our member states, etc. And we know exactly it's not enough, because the need is quicker growing than the support. And this is a psychological dilemma also for this committee and for the people. So we have to work against our own fatigue, the threat of the fatigue, because that produces speechlessness. And let me ask the following question to our guests. We have a full debate in the bubble, in the newspapers, in the online media on the weapon supply. And we know about the cleavages here, and do we send the right missiles? Do we send them early enough? Do we send enough of them or not? We have a full debate on the next step of integration within the European institutions, rightly so, both of that. But what is the picture? And it's also a question to DG ECHO. What is the picture of European solidarity of the Team Europe balance sheet at the very end of the day? Is there full solidarity of our member states? Because you are referring to overall numbers. We do not exactly know the share of our member states' participation. Give us a picture, because if we would like to mobilize the things that can be mobilized, we need to have a clear picture on who is in the front line sharing solidarity and who can perhaps mobilize more.
Thank you, Udo. Eric, would you like to intervene? Yeah.
Yes. First, thank you all for your work and all the information. I think many questions I have are already answered with the input you made. I wanted to say one first point. I know that nobody is forgetting it, but I think the best humanitarian aid Ukraine can receive is if Russia just ends the war. It could end in a few seconds. If just Vladimir Putin says it's over, we go home, no problem anymore. And that's, I think, also, like, from a political point of view, of course, the first aim, where we have to have discussions on how to increase the pressure on Russia to not make it worse, to fuel this war further. Secondly, I think the general question I have is, like, what can we do as parliamentarians in the European Parliament? Like, is there something? Of course, we need more money, we need more attention, and all these things. But is there something specific we could do? And then I have two specific questions on reports on booby traps and stuff. Is it a thing? How to deal with situations where Russia booby traps things as a thing also for the humanitarian aid? And then second point, we had a resolution on humanitarian aid last week. I think many good points in it. One point is to criticize double taps, and is double tap also a problem in Ukraine, and how you deal with it?
Okay, and just one question from myself before we go to the External Action Service, and maybe Ernest and Shahbaz may be able to intervene. But just from my own point of view for MSF, we heard from the World Food Programme just a moment ago that the killing zone, it's a terrible phrase, is increased from 15 kilometres to 50 kilometres. You also say that you've lost access to 80 villages that you previously accessed with mobile clinics. Now, I know that MSF would have one of the highest risk appetites and capability and inclination to go into the most difficult humanitarian zones. So maybe you could just elaborate the loss of access and relate it, if you can, to the nature of the drone warfare and how it's impacted the killing zone. And second, different point, MSF is always more outspoken because your donor base is very different. You don't rely on institutional funding. Have you noticed a change in the advocacy atmosphere as other actors are less outspoken because of the restrictions on their funding, earmarking, the transactional nature of humanitarian funding these days that we heard about from World Food Programme? So they're my questions. Before we go to our three main guests, I want to just introduce the External Action Service who are present. Ms. Marta Witrikowska is Deputy Head of the Ukraine Division at the EAS for some brief comments. Marta, you're welcome. You have the floor for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for organizing this important debate and drawing our attention to the plight of civilians and the situation in the public health care. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I mean, on our side, I would like to say that many of the atrocities described today in the presentations and experienced by Ukraine and Ukrainians are the result of war crimes. These intentional attacks against civilians are classified as war crimes under the humanitarian law. Unfortunately, we have witnessed violence against civilians since the very beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, and this violence is increasing systematically, as we heard today. Unfortunately, Russia's attacks against employees of humanitarian organizations are also becoming more frequent. As we heard today in the presentations, Russia's war of aggression is having devastating effects on Ukraine's public health system and is also placing a heavy burden on the public health systems in the years to come. Attacks on hospitals, clinics, ambulances, energy infrastructure, they have disrupted access to essential health care, while at the same time the needs of the population have risen dramatically. So on our side, from the European External Action Service, what we do and what we will continue to do is we will continue calling on Russia to uphold international humanitarian law, and we continue to condemn any deliberate attacks on healthcare facilities, medical convoys or humanitarian workers. We will continue supporting Ukraine and continue putting pressure on Russia. We will continue working on accountability mechanisms to bring those responsible for the attacks, for the war crimes to account. We will continue global outreach to third countries and continue strategic communication campaigns. And we will also continue preparation for the winter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marta. We are also joined by DG Enest, so please, you have the floor for 2 minutes. You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. My name is Fernando Fonseca from DG Enest, Ukraine Service. I will be short, highlighting our main support under the Ukraine facility to healthcare. So we all know that we have 3 different pillars of support under the Ukraine facility, and under Pillar 1, we are mainly working on supporting investments in the healthcare in Ukraine. And Ukraine can use 400 million euros until the end of 2027. So for the 4 years of the Ukraine facility, 24 to 2027, for these investments. I give you a few examples. Ukraine can use this money for shelters in the healthcare facilities, hospital equipment, but also to repair damaged healthcare facilities and infrastructure. Under the Pillar 2 of the Ukraine facility, we call it the Ukraine Investment Framework. The Commission is working with European and international financial institutions, and here we have currently 2 main programs, one with the Czech National Promotional Bank and the Czech Development Agency, which is basically aimed at renovating and modernizing hospitals, and the second one with the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, where we are strengthening emergency and primary healthcare across Ukraine. Finally, the third pillar of the Ukraine facility is managed by the EU delegation in Ukraine and its capacity building and technical assistance projects. Here I would mention our 2 main projects which are being implemented by the World Health Organization. One is on mental and physical rehabilitation, and the other one has recently started, and it's to continue. I say continue because WHO was already for years helping Ukraine on this, with our funding, but also without our funding. It's basically to continue giving capacity building to the Ministry of Health to make the necessary reforms. And now with the accession process ongoing, it's very important to help Ukraine to align with the extensive and complex EU acquis under the chapter of the EU acquis on public health. And I would stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fonseca, for that. And now I will give the floor to Shahbaz Israr Khan, who is MSF's Operations Coordinator for Ukraine. Shahbaz, you're welcome. You have two minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, to emphasize, as you also mentioned, that MSF is an independent, impartial and neutral organization, and our funding is, we are not dependent on institutional donors. 97% of our funding is from individual donors. That gives us this leverage of being financially independent. With this, I would like to emphasize when medical facilities are being attacked, and as we witnessed that out of 8 facilities that we left, 4 were destroyed. 81 villages that remain without access. Medical workers that are then clearly are attacked in clearly marked emblems that should have been protected under IHL. And all the human testimonies and sufferings this report covers. It all indicates, and all the testimonies are quite strong, and they indicate that these attacks are not incidental. These attacks are not erratic. It is deliberate, and it is a strategy. Based on that, we call upon for the protection of healthcare as to condemn attacks on civilian infrastructures, humanitarian workers, healthcare workers, and facilities. Press for respect and implementation of international humanitarian law and UNHCR 2286. Promotion of independent, impartial, and systematic investigation into attacks. Support emergency care along the front line, which is under quite pressure, as we also witness in terms of the mobile clinics near to the front line or to the different healthcare services specifically new to the front line. Mental health services, rehabilitation and continuity of treatment. Finally, do not normalize attacks against the healthcare and the healthcare workers. 2286 must be fully respected and implemented. Normalization of attacks on healthcare must stop. Either it is Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, or any other country. It must not happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahbaz, for that. So let's go back to our main speakers. for their response to the specific questions and any concluding remarks. So, Chris, I'll go to you for 2 minutes, if you can, please.
So, yeah, in your own question regarding the what we call this grey zone, so it's true that you're looking at a 1,000 kilometre front line with not much movement. However, the movement is in depth. So the drones are reaching further and further into the areas where we're trying to help our patients. And it means that, for example, a hospital in Eastern Dnipro, Shakhtarske Hospital, I was there earlier this year, each trip to the hospital is a calculated risk because there was attacks on the road, and it's 40 kilometres from the front line, so you'd think it's reasonably safe, but that's far from the case. We mentioned in the report a family. The father was killed, and the sons drove back, and multiple injuries, etc., on the survivors of that attack. So the combination of weapons that have longer reach, deeper, and then the disregard for a white vehicle with a red cross on the roof is really problematic. It was mentioned with regard to from our Finnish guest, but this is something that we're seeing quite regularly there. You raise as well the issue of how vocal organisations are. So it's true that Médecins Sans Frontières, we chose to have private funding, independent funding from states. I think one of the funding isn't the only issue. If to expand it out a little bit, what we've seen, for example, MSF has been deregistered in Israel, for example, so we're not really able to work effectively in Gaza. And there is a tendency by governments to select the aid organisations that they consider to be, less vocal, for example. So, as international journalists are not allowed into Gaza, neither are a lot of the independent aid organisations, and indeed we had even the creation of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which was like a private company to replace. So those are tendencies, trends, let's say, that are worrying, and clearly for European Union should defend. It's one of the great achievements somehow, the international humanitarian law, independent aid actors able to cross front lines, etc. This is core business for the European Union, and it should be for all governments, be it in Ukraine and in Gaza and elsewhere.
Thank you, Chris, for that answer. Hans, a specific question directed to you. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'll actually touch upon two questions that were raised, and perhaps I'll start with the question on what more can we do, sort of as a European Parliament and European institutions. I think my view of this is fairly clear. Attacks against healthcare facilities are not acceptable. They are illegal under international humanitarian law, and they cannot be accepted in any possible way. So we need to expose these attacks. We need to expose those responsible for it. We need to speak up, and we need to increase the pressure, and we need to hold those responsible accountable for it. And on that, I just wanted to mention also that our colleagues from the FBI are also funding programs to support the investigation and the prosecution of international crimes in Ukraine. So there's really a very sort of broad use of all of the available instruments. And I think on the advocacy, the speaking up, the European Parliament can really help, and it is very important that we're having this debate here. Secondly, what more can we do? We need to sustain the effort. We need to respond to the needs that we have on the ground. It's now the 5th year into this war. We need to continue to mobilize the funding necessary for all of this, and we're trying to do our part on the European Commission side, but it's important that all member states do the same thing. Coming to this very specific question about the sort of solidarity picture and who is doing what, here I can reassure you that the response to the crisis in Ukraine is a real burden-sharing effort. If you look at the in-kind donations from member states through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, it is the largest and the most generous operation we have ever conducted, with really all 27 member states and some of our participating countries providing aid to Ukraine. There are, of course, front runners. There are member states that do more than others, the Scandinavian, the Baltic countries, the Nordic countries in general. Germany in particular also has done enormous efforts. But everybody's contributing, and that is really fantastic. Specifically on the medical evacuation, we have 22 member states contributing, again with Germany taking the largest part of the patients. 1,200 patients of the more than 5,000 patients have gone to German hospitals.
Thank you, Hans.
But also a country as Lithuania has done a lot. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. I'm sorry we have very limited time. So let us see, can we just give a final word and brief word to Valeria, if she is still with us, can see us and hear us. Hello, Valeria, can see you. You have 2 minutes to make some concluding remarks. If there's anything you want to respond to, I'm sorry we have very little time. Thank you.
Hello?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. With the response of all of the from all of the presenters, I would just like to say once again, on behalf of the Ministry of Health and on behalf of Ukraine as a citizen, we would like to say thank you for the support. Thank you for the contribution that the EU is doing at this point. Thank you to all the organizations such as Doctors Without Borders and No Safe Place to Heal for the help, for the input. Once again, as the presenters have said, there are ongoing struggles, there are ongoing problems at the frontline areas, and there's effort put to provide medical services at such front lines. Effort is an ongoing, it's a constant situations that we face. But on the other hand, I also want to point out that with the help of the partners and with the help of the other countries, we are able to evacuate patients and provide them with treatment that they need that we can't provide at this point in our country. Also, the resilience that Ukraine has built during the 5 years of the full-scale war has been only possible with the help of the European Union. So we look forward to the support that can be given in the future. We look forward to any cooperation, and we are always pleased to share experience if it is needed. So just to reflect on the presentations that were given, we would just like to say thank you.
Well, I think the gratitude is very much reciprocated for the sacrifices that you're making. So the final word, you will go to Pekka Taveri. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you, thank you, colleagues. Yesterday we opened Accession Cluster 6 for Ukraine, and Ukraine's future is in EU. We all know that, and that's the message we have to convey to Putin. He has already lost. Ukraine will become member of EU and Europe. Well, that probably don't stop Putin. He will continue to try to break Ukraine's willingness to fight by killing civilians and destroying infrastructure because he can't win the Ukrainian army. So, in order to make it possible for Ukraine to fight, the healthcare resilience and social resilience go hand to hand. Behind this together, and this will remain a long-term effort and engagement for EU. In some areas, cooperation is already exemplary, and we can even learn from Ukraine's progress and innovative approaches. For Ukraine's recovery, we will have to apply the principle of a build back better. And when in the future the war will end, we have to change the way we support. We have to help to build up the infrastructure, but we also have to help in the rehabilitation of injured veterans and civilians and psychosocial support for millions of traumatized Ukrainians. And our Parliament is fully behind supporting Ukraine, and the healthcare sector will remain a priority for both for immediate humanitarian needs and also the longer run in the EU's progress. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I just want to thank the members and their teams and the Secretariat, Jesper and his team. I hope you all have a great summer. Thank the interpreters for your patience with us. And look, I hope you, and the external institutions for their attendance at our committees over the full year. Thank you very much. And we wish you all a very good summer. Come back in September for very important work that faces us. So thank you all very much. Nice to meet you. Yeah.